Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AAS YouTube channel. And we're going to continue in this series on tools and tips for teaching online. We've done 2 videos so far. One was sort of a global at the 30,000 foot level. And then we did another one on driving student engagement. And I'll put the links to that in the description below the video. And in this one, we're going to go after one single question. How will you, as an instructor, communicate with your student? And with me again is Chris Impey, and I'll let Chris start it off.
Right. So, our baseline, we'll just use, as always, the baseline of what you're used to in a face-to-face class. So when you deal with students in a face-to-face class, it's pretty simple. You get questions during the class. They hang out after class or before class. If they don't want to raise their hand in the class, you have office hours, and you have email. And that, those are mostly the modes. And if you're like most of the people I know, you do not go down a slippery road of having your students text you at all hours of the night or weekend or whatever. So email is a nice thing generally. And of course, it's going to apply in the online situation too. So we're immediately talking about online tools too. Email is nice because the generation of millennials and our current undergraduate students have sort of stopped using email in their general social life. So email is the thing the university sort of insists that they use and communicates with them and instructors with them. So it's kind of an old fogey thing. And therefore, to me, it retains just a slight formality that they tend to use it appropriately. They don't sort of get too informal with you, and it's appropriate for talking to them about difficult issues, their grades and how their performance and so on. So email is always going to be there. And but when you're online, you have other capabilities and tools in your CMS that you should make use of too, because you again want to have as many ways as possible for students to communicate with you. And some of them, if possible, should be synchronous, should be live, as well as the sort of asynchronous email. Frank, maybe I'll hand off to you now.
Oh, okay. I'll pick up a couple of that. Announcements in the course are important, so that you do a global communication. Sort of best practices. You don't want to overwhelm. You don't want to be putting out an announcement every hour on silly things. So best practices is like twice a week, once at the beginning of the week if you're doing week-long stuff, and then once halfway through, depending on when your assignments are due. Sort of aim that for halfway through, and just give them a reminder when the due dates are and that you're there. So you do want to use the announcements; they're very important, but you do want to use it lightly and use it strategically for the course. Let's see. One piece of technology, sometimes you'll write. The student will ask you how to do question 1 on the assignment. And so you'll write either an email or on the discussion board what you think is a very clear description of how to do question 1 or guidance how to do it. And then the student, I still don't get it. And then you'll go even deeper, and then they still say, oh, no, I'm totally lost. I don't get it. Okay. So one of the tools that I've used that has been effective is what's called screencasting, where you will capture what is on your screen. So it's sort of like a whiteboard type of environment. At least some of them are whiteboard type of environments. And so you can scribble stuff and write, and in sort of real time, make sure that the student is getting what you're saying. So it's kind of like taking them to the board before or after class and just walking through the general problem. So screencasting I have found works pretty well for resolving things that don't necessarily come across super well in text, particularly if there's an equation involved, right? You want to do Kepler's third or something, and they're just not getting p squared and a cubed, and just so the ability to write it down live and have them acknowledge that they are getting that part of it goes a long way. So I am a proponent of screencasting, so I would suggest doing that one.
Right. So onto the sort of synchronous, sort of live way to interact with your students at a particular time, although obviously no particular place. What we're doing now is, of course, the Zoom session, and Zoom is integrated into all the major CMSs that I'm aware of, or there may be a very close equivalent to Zoom. These sort of teleconferencing softwares are, they've had a convergence of their features, so they pretty much all do a lot of things. They're quite capable, and they all will be ported into a CMS so that you just can launch a session and you don't have to, you don't have to think too much about the nuts and bolts of it. So this is a way for, there's just the two of us here, but we were having our, COVID-19 heads up session with the director of Stewart Observatory this morning, and I watched as the number of participants went through 100 to 120, 130. And so, if you have, it doesn't matter how big your class is, it really could be 500 or 600, you can do a Zoom session. And, of course, it's hard for every voice to be heard when it's that big, but don't worry about the size of your class. In the interface, you will have a lot of nice tools. You'll be able to see the list of your participants. They will see very simple icons that allow them to mute themselves. And, generally you're going to tell them to mute themselves unless they have something they want to participate at the moment. And then they can raise their little virtual hand, there's a little hand, raise my hand icon. That means they would like to speak. So they can mute their video if they just feel they didn't do a good job on combing their hair that morning or whatever. You don't have to see them. So the video is mutable, the audio is mutable, but you can see who's in the room, in the virtual room. And again, it's very scalable. So, and everyone, of course, for the people who do ask questions, when they do, you're sort of moderating that yourself as the instructor. Everyone hears and gets the benefit of that. So they're pretty useful in a classroom situation.
Yeah, and I've seen some of those video tools. So, we use Zoom as sort of a standard candle, if you like, but there are others, examples of the class, where the instructor will have the capability of muting all microphones, because sometimes people forget to do it and others leave it on, and so there's just cacophony. So usually there's sort of a master control where you can mute everybody's microphone, and then as somebody raises their hand or posts something in the chat window, you can unmute their microphone, and they have a clearer communication than this background noise of dogs barking and dishes going and everything else. Chats are also very effective inside of a standard candle Zoom to get things going. You can repeat the question and then answer it. That's also if you don't want to use voice, if you want to stay on the text side with video, that works well too.
And of course, as we're doing now to put up on YouTube, you can record these sessions. So, a sort of a slight asterisk against a live Zoom session is, and in some universities, there's a sort of proviso attached to online classes that because some of your students may have jobs, may be in the military, they may really have restrictions on being online at a certain time or a day in heart of prime time, say. So it's a little tricky. It's dangerous to have too much critical information or critical component of your course that requires them to be in a particular Zoom session, because you may be disadvantaging someone who's working 2 jobs or nights or has a family and kids, or like I said, in the military, who knows. So you've got to be aware of that. And you can always, as we're doing here, you can easily record it and you can post that in your classroom space, in your CMS. So they can see it after the fact. If they really wanted to get onto that session and there was no way they could for that particular one, then they can see it after the fact.
Yeah, in my case, that's actually nearly a requirement because my students are spread out all over the globe. And there's no single time zone that works for everybody. So when I do my online office hours or things along those lines, I will spread them out at minimum at 12-hour intervals, sometimes more finely to try and get a better coverage across the globe. So yeah, thumbs up on recording asynchronously and making that available to your students either through your CMS, LMS, it'll be university dependent on what's going on there. You can also post them on YouTube, I suppose.
There's a little thing I'll mention back to email, because again, I think in our first session we said, you know, your CMS is your friend because while you may be going up a what feels brutal learning curve as you teach online for the first time, and that's fine. You know, you should just get comfortable with the vanilla stuff first and get till it's second nature, and then you'll gradually be able to layer in the capabilities. But one of the capabilities in any course management system is the ability to communicate with subsets of students defined in particular ways. So, you know, there's the standard, the two standard modes of, you know, the blast to the whole class, a reminder of a deadline or the due date or the final or whatever that you know you need to reach everyone. There's the point to point of a particular student or responding in a thread, in an email thread with a particular student. But the CMSs will give you ability to speak to particular subsets. So for example, if the class is split up into groups to do projects, those groups of students will be identifiable in the CMS, and you can communicate just to the set of students doing a particular project. If you go into your the grading part of your CMS, and you want to find, say, the set of students who just never submitted the first assignment, which is, we know as instructors, we all know that's a bit of a flag. That's a flag that they may slip away or not do well, or they have a problem and they haven't come to you. So you could identify the students who didn't submit the first assignment and communicate with them, and sort of anonymously. So it's, you know, you're just communicating the same message to a set of students. It's not personal to them. They don't see the other names of the other students, so it's blind copied in that sense.
Right.
Or it could be, for example, I mean, this is getting a little more sophisticated, but you could find students whose performance is degrading over time, you know, who did significantly worse on the second midterm than the first midterm, for example, and identify that set of students. And, you know, maybe they just had a bad day, whatever. There could be a completely benign reason, but in the aggregate, being able to communicate with strategically with subsets of students, which the CMS will let you do, just shows that you care, is a way of you having your finger on the pulse of your course, and it goes all the way up, hundreds of students, which is overwhelming. You can still do these methods with large classes.
Interventions, right? Absolutely. And most universities will also have an office or resources for student intervention. So if somehow you feel you're not getting through or you're not getting a response on declining performance in a course, you know, you should of course feel free to engage your retention and intervention folks, and they'll engage.
There's one thing I don't even know if this is, I'm just going to raise it because I don't know if it's possible, but I've used it quite a lot. Do you do polling, Frank, in your class?
I have done polling in the past. I don't do it in the current epoch, but right. I have used it.
So polling is another way of interacting with your class and, you know, getting, I mean, the polling software, okay, the big one that I'm aware of that exists outside of the CMS and is used in business and so on is Poll Everywhere. Again, there are other packages that will work in a CMS. You can use it for, you know, misconception testing. You can use it to just juice up the class with a current event. You know, you can find out what they think about, you know, it's for opinion as well as knowledge. It's not really, the whole idea is to get a little social element into your class. So it's not just testing their knowledge, it's testing what they think about something or what their opinion is. And so students kind of like it that way. They like to be asked, they like to see what the whole class thinks relative to what they think, because they're not always in the heart of the opinion of the class. And then you can share that too. So if you're, you know, ask your local guru if it's not an obvious feature that you see, whether your CMS does support polling, because that's another way to engage with your students.
And if you add like a 1 point to their score for responding to the poll, you'd be very surprised how much more engagement you get with 1 point. So yeah, give them some points in the course or credit for engaging.
I mean, and you can all see that in some way, some of these modes of engaging students as the instructor are sort of more sophisticated proxies for taking attendance, right? I mean, and that's what you want, of course. You don't want just is there someone sitting in that seat. You want a student who's asked a question or engaged with content or worked with one of their fellow students or asked you a question or whatever, been in a live session. Those are the measures you want. And again, they're little morsels of engagement. Each one is small, which is good because it's low stakes. Students like the small, frequent touches, the low stakes stuff, rather than the big, come in for, instead of a written final, you can have an oral final where you come in and I grill you on the subject. That's very scary for students. So these are the opposite. These are easy to do.
Badges cost you nothing.
Right, badges. People love badges.
Great badges. Pins and other things. Cool. Okay, I think that'll do. Chris, you want to give any final messages of encouragement?
Just something that occurred to me when we started doing this, and maybe I don't like repeating myself, maybe we did this in the first one, but it's worth repeating, that this process, if you're going through this process, or maybe you've taught once online and now you've got to do all your classes, you're teaching more than one class or a class you've never taught online, so you're out of your comfort zone, the food dishes move a lot, and there's a lot of stuff. I mean, we're throwing stuff into this. It may just seem like, oh, come on, just tell me the one or two things, don't give me 3 or 4 or 5. So in all of this, I think both of our good advice would be, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You can do a really good job online by just taking from these toolkits a couple that fit you, that you can implement, and then making a mental note, wow, when I have a little more CPUs in next semester or next year, I'll try that, or I'll try that more. I'll try a few more extra tricks. So don't try and do too much out of the gate, because you're going to hit your limit switch just like the students will too.
Exactly. Recall the first time you used LaTeX to write a manuscript for the AAS journals, right? It's a learning curve. It can be steep, but rewarding. And so, yeah, just be positive. You can do this. It'll be great. Your class will be great. In fact, you might even find out that you like teaching online better. I do. Okay, that'll do. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.